Alright, second try. Let's hope now you guys can see me or hear me, or if you're very lucky, you can even do both. Yes, I can see myself. That's a good sign in general. Alright, let's get it started. Hello everybody, once again, my name is Niclas Huschenbeth and this is the Premium Coaching live show here on Chess24, in which I'm going to analyze the games of premium members. And let's get right to it. Still, just in case, to verify, you guys can let me know in the chat if you can hear and see me clearly, just to be on the safe side, but at least I'm able to see myself now. So the video is running. And let's switch over to the first game I have. It's from wankarl. He was playing with the black pieces. And let's get right to it, shall we? D4, D5. Let's flip the board around. Oh, it's in Spanish. My Spanish is not great, but I figured it out. All right, so what is wankarl doing? Knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, c5. Okay. So the London system, which is really gaining popularity these days. Knight c6, knight bd2. What is the best setup in this opening for black? Well, one common setup is to go e6 here and then go from there. But actually I'm wondering, because white hasn't played c3 yet. So I think here you might be able to go queen b6, hitting both d4 and b2. And it's a little bit awkward for white to meet, as far as I can tell. For example, knight b3 could be answered by c4 already and taking on b2 the next move. And I think white has a slight problem here dealing with both these threats of taking on d4 and taking on b2. So I think you could have made use of this inaccuracy that white committed. Since here, what is even white going to do to defend those pawns? You don't want to play d takes c5, just queen takes b2. Beautiful center and rough pawn structure. So this is not great. And Jeff.784 is saying not here, Jeff. Well, if you can't hear or see me, then blindness pointing out, Jeff, refresh. Yeah, please refresh. And then it should be working, hopefully. So I think that was a good opportunity. And you know, sometimes what happens in the opening especially, we just play our routine moves and we don't think too much. But it's worth to just, take a few moments just to make sure, well, are we following the typical lines here, or maybe did my opponent mix something up? And here your opponent mix it up. He should go c3 first, securing or protecting upon d4 one more time, and then playing knight b2 next. All right, but in general, the best, well, what I play is to go e6 and then go bishop d6, and yeah, that's fairly solid and equalized. But of course, you do need to know some lines there. So you took on d4. Yeah, I don't think there's any need to take on d4. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but if you don't need to take on d4, then why do it? You can still have this option for the future, and you want to just maintain the tension here in the center. So I'm going to criticize this move a little bit. E takes d4, now you bring out the bishop. I think that's perfectly fine. c3, and now you play queen b6, a little bit too late, but well, that's fine too. Queen b3, e6, now your opponent takes on b6, takes, bishop c7, knight d7. Alright, bishop e2, bishop e7, castle, castle. Looks like a pretty equal endgame to my mind. Rook e1, rook c8, bishop g3, h6. Yeah, of course you have this slight weakness here on the queen side, and I'm stopping a little bit because Prudoman is saying the image is not clear, looks very bad. Alright, let me check myself. Well, on my end, so far it looks good. Doesn't look very problematic to me, so if anybody else is also having problems with the quality of the stream, please let me know. Alright, let's continue here. So what I was saying is you have those double pawns on the b file, and yeah, you're not going to be able to get rid of them really easily. One plan could be to try go b5 and then threaten to go b4, which white could prevent by playing a3, but then you might have some options to go knight b6, knight c4, knight a4, knight c4, knight a5, knight c4. Difficulty, of course, though, is to prepare b5 since, well, the bishop is covering it. So, yeah, not really sure what to recommend here. Okay, first going h6 doesn't hurt. Also to stop knight h4 ideas, that's good. Bishop f1, knight f6. And I think, yeah, maybe a plan to regroup this knight to d6 makes a lot of sense. h3, and here g5, yeah, I don't like that much. I would rather go knight e8 and then play knight d6 or bishop d6. And the knight is really, a lot of cases in these structures, the knight is very well placed on d6. So g5, not sure what it's doing for you, so I would be careful with these moves, pawn moves especially, because you can never take pawn moves back. So you want to be careful with those moves. Knight e5, you asked, should I trade pieces? Yeah, I mean, probably shouldn't. You should just take this one off. Because the knight could be quite annoying on e5, so that's fine. Takes, takes, knight e4, now you played. Alright. Guess that's fine too. The position just seems pretty equal to me anyway. f3, bishop f5. Just, I mean, this is really a tiny thing, but for some reason it feels a little bit more natural for me to put the bishop on g6 instead of f5. Just from my intuition, my gut feeling, it just seems more natural. But there's no apparent reason why that would be better, it just feels like to me. Bishop is slightly, tiny bit better placed on g6. King f2, rook a5. Yeah, I like rook a5 because, well, it's not really doing too much. You're saying I was thinking about the move bishop c2, bishop a4, bishop b5. After I exchanged the bishops, I was thinking to advance the pawn to b5 to paralyze the white pawns. Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine something like that, but maybe in a slightly different way. Let's see what the opponent did first of all. Yeah, let's see. So let's say here bishop g6, bishop g3. Now go b5 to threaten b4. Kind of a minority attack, right? So white pretty much has to go a3 to stop that. And now you can go bishop c2. And with the idea bishop b3, bishop c4. And then white can never take on c4. You would take with the b pawn and would repair your pawn structure and have a very nice pawn structure and also target here on b2. But in general, yeah, white will just leave it as it is and cannot really do much, to be honest. Position just seems equal to me. So instead you played bishop d8 here to exchange that pair of bishops, I assume. King e3, rook ca8. Oh, you want to prepare rook ca8. And I just activated Siri.
Okay, I found something on the web for can eat free book c8. Take a look.
Can eat free book c8. Well, that's not what I want. Anyways, rook ca8. So you want to prepare rook c8 so not allow bishop c7. That makes sense. The bishop is of course a little bit weirdly placed on d8. a3. Yeah, I want to create a weakness in the light squares. You have succeeded so, but these last two moves I'm not too happy about. But okay, it probably doesn't matter because white cannot do much either. Bishop d3. Takes. Bishop c7. Yeah, I'm wondering if somehow you can play for a win, for an attack. Or for something at least, but it's nothing I can come up with because you cannot undermine the pawns here on the queen side, obviously, because you can never play b4 unless for some tactical reasons, but white can always prevent that. So yeah, I think it makes sense to just go bishop c7. Takes, and you said you underestimated h4. I wonder how much of an issue that is. I think not much. Well, maybe a little bit. h4 might be unpleasant because, yeah, the rooks are out of play right now and you do need some time to get the rook to h-file. And white is threatening to take now and play rook e5, so you need to do something about it. So the first move that comes to mind was king g7, but I guess here white is playing rook h1. But for example here, if you just play rook a8, rook h5, and now you go f6. No, this might not be a good idea. No, now after rook h1 you have a problem. I want to go king g6 here now, say, well, everything protected, but not quite. Not quite. It feels like to me there should be a way to defend here. Of course, it is a little bit unpleasant, but in the game you just lose a pawn, so I'm wondering if that's necessary. So maybe you can do something like that. But it is true, white is controlling the only open file in the position and is having a little bit of pressure here. But it feels like it should be defendable, even though a little bit unpleasant. Also, I was wondering about this move, but yeah, I'm not too happy. Here, rook e5 even, and this is a pawn after all. But here this king f8, just giving the pawn g5, I'm not happy about. Also, you can think about g takes h4, rook h1. Yeah, but this might be also unpleasant because white is quick to put on pressure on the h6 pawn. And yeah, this might be problematic, g5. Even though even here you can play h5 and you have this tactical solution here that you can go king g6 and then pick up the pawn g5, and once again you're completely fine. So I think you had probably at least two possibilities to avoid losing a pawn. I think maybe you panicked a little bit because you didn't see this idea, h4 in advance, but then you just gotta switch over to defensive mode and try to find the best defensive resources. And I think just giving up the pawn here of king f8 was not the best way to go. King e7, rook takes g5. Rook 8, what is the best way to complicate the game? Well, look at the position, it's a rook endgame, not much going on. But as a general question, if you're worse, you just want to make it as difficult as possible for your opponent. Just again and again pose problems on this way to convert the advantage. Just make it as difficult as possible, maybe set little traps here and there, but don't go all in for a trap. Just don't play a move just for a trap, but it doesn't do anything for your position, or maybe you lose if your opponent doesn't go into a trap. But in general, just make it as difficult as possible. And one other rule of thumb, of course, is if you are the defender, or rather if you're down on material, you want to exchange pawns, right? So this is a common way to just reduce potential for your opponent to exchange all the pawns, more or less, and then it doesn't really matter if your opponent is up a pawn in most cases, right? So yeah, just pose as many problems as possible. Rook h1, rook cc8, and especially rook endgames, of course, oftentimes offer good chances to draw with a pawn down. So you exchange a pair of rooks, that's fine, especially because you couldn't really activate the rooks. In general, it's better to keep both rooks because it creates more chance for counterplay. Two rooks can create threats against the king and cause all kinds of trouble. But in this position, the problem is you don't have any venues for your rooks, any ways to get him into a game. So I think it's completely fine that you exchange rooks. Now you play b5. Yeah, I'm not sure if you needed to play b5 here. Maybe rook g8 immediately would have been a little bit better. Because you're allowing your opponent to grab some more space with g5. Rook g8, f4. So that wasn't necessary. You could have gone rook g8 here right away, when your opponent will take much longer to play g5 and f4. So b5, I don't like that much. g5, rook g8, f4. You're offering a rook exchange. That's very dangerous, my friend. Indeed, it didn't work out in your favor. Actually, white didn't take now. Probably could have done that as well. But, you know, your opponent's doing it in a smart way here. He's forcing your king to an even worse square. Now f5, and the king is coming in. And that's it. And you had to resign. So that was a huge mistake, of course, on your part. I don't need to tell you that, obviously. So in general, what I like to say is that if you offer to go into a pawn endgame, you got to be absolutely sure that you will be fine, that the pawn endgame is drawn, or whatever the result is you want to achieve. So here you just need to be passive. And of course, for us humans, we don't like to be passive. We like to do something. We like to attack stuff, be active. But here, that's the unpleasant part about your position. You need to be passive. So just go back, king e7. And then let your opponent show how he's going to win this. But honestly, it will be tough for you to defend. One possible plan could be for white to bring the king over here. And it's just so difficult for you to play because you don't have any targets. White is controlling the only open file. And yeah, you cannot open any files really. You want to play f6, but that's not really possible. So in general, it seems difficult. But by playing rook g7, you're pretty much just giving your hand immediately. So I think really one critical point was this rook at game might still be defendable, or you have good chance, but here b5 also just brings the pawn a little bit closer for white to attack it, and doesn't really help your position, I would say. So going here rook g8 would have given you much better chances. Yeah, so I think the game was pretty normal. Not much happened. You entered this endgame, which is maybe a little bit annoying already because it's difficult to create any plays since you have those double pawns here. So you maybe don't need to do that. And then it was equal for a long time, but I think, yeah, the first critical mistake here was to go king f8 in this position, just give up this pawn for no compensation really, and then to go into a pawn game, of course. So that's, I think, the biggest takeaway from this game. Be very careful with pawn games and be absolutely sure they are drawn. Or also, I don't know what was going on through your mind, but in general, yeah, if you're worse, it's unpleasant. You need to defend. But just fight, 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 and it will pay off. It will pay off. Maybe, well, you'll still lose some games, but other games you will draw. So what happens sometimes, we have this mentality, whatever, I'm worse anyway, maybe this pawn game is a draw, so I'll just try. But then in this case, you just made life so much easier for your opponent. All right, thanks for sending in wankarl. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but thanks for sending it in. And hello to Bronstein71 in the chat. So here we have the next game by Thrawn. And that was a classical game. So let's have a look. First switch. Oh, not switch. Flip the board, I should say. And let's bring it on. Oh, the engine evaluation is on. I don't like that. Let's turn it off. And now let's go through it. Bishop c4, bishop c5. This is the Italian game, also gaining a lot of popularity recently. Bishop a7, castle h6, knight bd2, castle rook e1, rook e8, knight f1, d6, knight g3, bishop e6, bishop c2, d5, queen e2. Now, my first serious question here by Thrawn. In this position, I had the feeling I did everything right, but I was just not sure how to react to the primitive attack of white. In the game, I had the idea of going b5, but I was not sure how to deal with this position. What is your take on it? Yeah, I think your position is pretty sound. First of all, but b5 I don't like. Usually b5 is played to, well, obviously push the bishop back. But here it feels like more of a weakness, which can be attacked with a4. And also this idea you're talking about going b4 is not really doing too much, I would say. So I would rather play a move like queen d7. Yeah, queen d7 looks like a very healthy move here. And just connect the rooks, bring the a rook to d8, and just improve your position as much as possible right now. And you're talking about some primitive, simple attack white execute here. So we'll see what white exactly did, because right now Ruy Lopez is not really a position where, not so much where white is going to just be able to attack like that. One other typical maneuver, of course, is to go knight e7, knight g6. But since you have played d5 already, might not be easy to execute. And in some positions you can also go d4. And I'm wondering, maybe you can just do it right now. Maybe you can just go d4 right now. It's certainly an option. Well, I've criticized b5 a little bit, but maybe after all, it is a decent move. Because yeah, like you're saying, there are some options like going b4 and some variations, as well as putting the bishop on c4. Alright, so let's see what happened. Bishop e3, d4, once again a move. I'm not sure if I should make this move or not. So what was wrong with going for this plan here with d takes e4? D takes e4 and bishop c4. This is forcing a queen trade already. And looks like you just have comfortably equalized here, more or less. This seems also quite possible. I mean, I know all these positions are not very exciting. I wouldn't go for this if I was black, honestly, but it would be possible. I like d4 though. Bishop d2. Especially since you want a tempo here, so I like that. And yeah, now queen d7 I also quite like. What I want to do at some point would be to take on c3 and then play b4 to open up the square d4 for the knight or for my piece in general. But of course you got to be careful here. For one, there are options like bishop a4, and also white can just take this pawn, and yeah, wouldn't be enough compensation here probably. Even though, I mean, you can look at it at least. Bishop g4. It's interesting, because now knight d4 is quite a strong threat, so probably white has to go bishop e3. Now still knight d4 has to be taken, bishop takes. Interesting, but maybe not enough compensation here for black. But certainly interesting to consider. Even here, this pin is quite annoying, and to stop h3, black could play something knight h5. Has to take, otherwise knight f4 would happen. And then white is really struggling to get out of this pin, and whenever white moves, of course you take on f3 and destroy the white pawn structure in front of the king. But queen d7, I mean, this is such a natural move. Just connecting rooks for now. Preparing rook d8. I like this move. Knight h4. And now bishop g4. Okay. Well, obviously white wants to go knight f5. That's pretty obvious. So what can you do? So you played bishop g4, queen f1. Not sure if the bishop is so well placed on g4 to begin with. Now knight h7. The idea was to avoid having the knight hanging on f6 in future variations. But it seems to be a strange move. And it's apparent that I don't really know how to put my pieces or where to place my pieces. Yeah, you can see I'm taking my time here, because also for me it's not an easy position. And those Roy Lopez positions are very rich strategically. Knight e7 certainly a move to consider, since you're covering f5 for now. white can probably just play h3, bishop drops back, and also come back with the queen. And then the question is, what is your follow-up? White is just going to play queen f3. It's not clear what you're doing here. Yeah, a little bit unpleasant. A little bit unpleasant after all, because you're not really creating any play anytime soon. Another move to consider would be to go something like king h7. To be able to answer knight f5. Well, not g6 right now because of knight takes h6, but maybe to have this option in the future. And if knight f5, just knight e7, now exchanging the knight. And by doing so, getting rid of the pressure, really. So really, maybe knight f5 is not a big problem. And Sander Fox is recommending c5, c4. Yeah, maybe a little bit slow. I assume you mean in positions like that. Here c5, c4. Could be. Could be an idea. But here maybe white can take on d4. And Enthusiast14 is asking, what's so special about this coaching? Well, what's so special? Premium members are sending in their games they played in real life or blitz games or whichever games they want. And I take a look at them and tell them, to the best of my knowledge, where they could improve. And kind of from my perspective as being an experienced player who has played chess for a long time, trying to give tips and helping people, because after all, analysis is one of the most important ways to improve. So I think it's quite a good thing. At the same time, I'm kind of struggling in this position. I have to be honest. To really give very sound advice, I'm still trying to figure it out myself a little bit, and sometimes that's what it is. I mean, if you turn on the engine here, of course, it will spit out some moves, but in general, talking about the plans, and this is why the Roy Lopez is so rich, really, because there's so much going on, very complex. But yeah, starting from this sequence, bishop g4, not sure about. I think here you can just play a move like rook d8. The more I look at it, the more I'm saying, well, you can just ignore what white is doing. Because queen f3, obviously, just bishop g4 right now. And if knight f5, you can just go knight e7. And now white cannot keep the knights. Even if queen f3 now, you can just take everything off here. And whenever white needs to take with a pawn at some point, then you're completely fine, that's for sure. Completely fine here. So rook d8, or another move I consider was taking on c3 now and then going b4. Once again, this idea to put the knight on d4. Also quite interesting, I think. I don't think white should take here because of allowing knight d4, but maybe now knight f5. And yeah, now the question is if you have any good follow-up. And that's what I'm not sure about. But I like just a natural move and just asking white, well, what are you going to do? What's your plan here? What's your follow-up? So I think the sequence of bishop g4, queen f1, queen f1, knight h7, you're saying yourself, looks a little bit odd. h3, bishop e6, yeah, the queen is just coming back, and h3 is a move white want to play anyway. So bishop g4 doesn't look like it helped you a lot. Bishop c5, the bishop should help defending. Alright, bishop c5, let's have a look. Knight f5, king h8. But what about just a move like knight e7 here? Why not this move? I mean, okay, we can look at c takes d4. When black can probably just play bishop takes d4. And this feels fine to my mind. Knight takes, queen takes. And queen drops back to d6, can follow with c5, and you have a nice turret here on d3. What else? Well, once again, if white plays a move like, I don't know, queen h5, queen g4, queen f3, you're just going to take everything off on f5. Simple as that. And that should be fine. Once again, I mean, if e takes f5 here, okay. White can put a knight on e4 for now. But even this you can take off, bring the knight back to f6. That seems completely fine. All right. Let's return to the game. King h8 preventing queen g4, but here I think really just exchanging the knights would have been quite helpful. Even here, if this happens, well, now you have alleviate the pressure, right? So that helps you. After king h8, we are tolerating the knight on f5, queen f3, bishop f8. You're becoming more and more passive. It feels like rook f1. Knight e7. And you're saying, I have more space, so I shouldn't exchange too much, but the knight on f5 is strong. So you're following this rule of thumb, which is a really good rule of thumb. It is saying, if you have more space, don't exchange too many pieces, because it helps your opponent to move more freely, right? But I think maybe in this case you followed it too rigidly. I mean, now you're playing knight e7, but I think you could have done it already earlier. And yeah, in general, even if you have a space advantage, it is important to exchange strong pieces of your opponent. So you're doing the right thing here, absolutely. Takes, takes, now knight f5. And bishop g5. Interesting, yeah, good move probably here. But once again, also just taking on f5 seems fine. That just always feels fine to me. Just taking here. It's got to be fine. He takes f5. You follow with, well, knight f6. Now rook d8. A little bit concerned about this bishop, I have to be honest. That's my only concern. But even if knight f6, bishop b3, you just play maybe just bishop f8 back, protecting pawn on f7. And rook d8, Knight can come to d5, you can play c5. Just feels like completely fine here. But bishop g5, yeah, also seems like a very good move. Exchanging a pair of bishops, also still exchanging more attacking potential, and completely fine. But bishop f8, even here, g4. Now you're taking on f5. He took with the e pawn. G takes f5, g6 was your idea. What to think of that? Yeah, looks good to me. I mean, white is not really having any attack here. Probably has to take on g6 here. King h2. All looks fine. You can even play g5, probably. Go rook f8. Looks fine to me. Alright, let's follow the game. B in the chat is asking, isn't it a good plan to go f4 after rook f1, king h1? Yeah, if we just go back a few moments. Yeah, I wasn't really, I guess, around here where I could think about it. But nah, I think it's helping black more so if you go for this plan of rook f1, f4, because black wants to open up the position a little bit to obtain more counterplay. In general, of course, a very typical plan, but here to play with the pieces and to somehow initiate an attack with the piece makes more sense for white, but even then, not easy for white to do because just not enough forces. All right. This is the position. D takes c3, B takes c3. Was a mistake because of e4, I'm assuming. Bishop takes c3 had to be played. And then you want to go b4. Yeah. b4, bishop takes e5, knight g5. Queen g2, knight takes h3, takes, rook takes e5. That would be pretty nice for black, so white has to go king h2, you're saying, and then rook takes e5. Queen takes a8, rook e8 back with compensation. Yeah, I can see that. Queen f3, knight f4 even. Beautiful knight on f4. Not sure how much compensation it is, but looks nice. But yeah, even after bishop takes c3, I'm sure you can just play a move like rook d8 and you're also just fine here. Not worse by any means. Alright, but your opponent plundered, which is always nice to see. e4 takes, oh boy, white can't take back because of X-ray on the d-file. Bishop b3, c5, not just an extra pawn, and not just any pawn, very strong pass pawn on d3. Knight f6 and b4. The idea was to play rook d8 without allowing bishop a5. But what I had missed was the bishop c2 tactic. So what to do instead of b4? Not that simple maybe yet. You're saying rook e4. Yeah, that's a nice move to hit this pawn on c4, yeah. Yeah, knight e4, what Patrick is pointing out. Queen f3, this of course looks nice with the knight on e4, but there's no follow-up here. I don't want to take on d2. Yeah, nothing apparent here either, really. Alright, but rook e4 is a nice move to threaten b takes c4, and of course if that pawn leaves, then c4 is coming. Those pawns are rolling. So yeah, nice move, and it's a nice candidate moves. You know, nice candidate move. You need to consider different options, and then you will come across this move. I was first looking at queen d4, but the problem is it still runs into bishop e3. Even this you can think about though. Queen e4 also looks quite nice for black. Alright, b4, rook bishop f4, rook a d8. And now bishop c2 had to be played, and that's what he missed. Yeah, and even if you're up a pawn, of course, you still gotta be careful and keep your guard up to defend against any tactics. Bishop c7, oh, now bishop d6, a very nice strike, which your opponent probably missed. Takes, takes, and now it's just, you have secured your exit pawn, and you convert it very safely from here, I'm assuming. Yeah. No further comments necessary. Alright. Congrats to the win. But yeah, I think there's still some takeaways here. Especially in the opening phase, you had a lot of difficulties. And I have to be honest, of course I could offer some advice, but I'm not as knowledgeable in these very rich strategic positions. It felt all good to me. Then the sequence with knight h7 and so on was a little bit strange, but didn't change the fact that it seemed like you were in a comfortable spot. And then you took advantage of your opponent's mistakes and brought it home. Of course, yeah, this one tactical error towards the end, where you let your opponent gave your opponent a chance to get back into the game, wasn't necessary, but someone already said, famous quote, it's one of the most difficult things in chess is to win one positions. And yeah, just what can I say about it? Just it's a lot about psychology too, and not relaxing too much, but staying focused, staying concentrated, and not being done with the game yet. Psychologically, mentally, already being maybe in the future, already imagining oneself as the winner, but staying present, staying focused, and always looking for a chance for the opponent and trying to avoid any tactics, of course. All right, let's go to the next game. Thanks for sending it in, Thrawn. And the next game is by a very strong player, Martin Brüdigam. FM 2370, so I have to prepare for this. And I'll take a sip. Of course, the stronger the player is, the more difficult it becomes for me to give good advice, but I'll still do my best here. And I'll turn off the engine and flip the board. There we go. And let's get to it. So the Bogo Indian. Yeah, I've seen this before. I've played this many times myself. D5, E5, now knight E4. I was not prepared for this probably somewhat dubious move. Oh, so my bad. We're not looking at Martin Brüdigam's game, but Fabian Fester. Fester, who is also a good player, but not quite as strong as Martin Brüdigam. So sorry, Fabian. I mixed it up because, well, somehow, I don't know why, I thought I was analyzing it for black. So let's flip the board again and go from here. Knight e4, you were not prepared for this dubious move. Knight fd7, the main line, of course. So over the board I decided to follow the plan of attack on the king side. Stronger players have opted for different moves in the past. According to the database, h4 is a novelty, but I have no idea about its value. Yeah, bishop d3 seems like the very natural move that comes to mind first. And you attach a game here between Rainer Boomer and Jonathan Karstedt. Yeah, or queen c2. I mean, bishop d3, just to my mind, looks very natural. Challenging this knight, and the game between Boomer and Karstedt. Black took on d2, bishop takes, d takes c4, bishop takes c4, knight d7. And yeah, queen c2 was played now. You can also play castle. And you can go from there. h4, of course you still have these ideas of attacking, but it just feels a little bit strange right now, especially with the knight on e4, which is blocking the diagonal. So I'm not sure of this move. And also in general, if you're surprised by your opponent, if you place a novelty, often it makes sense to just play natural moves and then go from there. Of course, with h4 you also surprise your opponent, but yeah, it is a risky double-edged approach, definitely. Okay, c5, bishop d3, and now f5. E takes f6, knight takes f6, and now d takes c5. Yeah, that's what I was talking about with the knight on e4. Well, black plays f5, you need to take, and now, the knight is on f6 already again, and black hasn't weakened himself by playing g6 or h6, which makes it much more difficult for you to attack the king, right? So yeah, I'm not sure about your attacking prospects. Of course, you have ideas for knight g5 and so on. It's interesting, but yeah, could also backfire. We'll see. Knight c6, b4, now e5. Black's playing in the center. C takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop c4, king h8. But you have won a pawn, which is nice. But now you would wish probably that your pawn was in h2. You could just castle and say, well, I'm up a pawn. What's the deal? But now black can always put a bishop on g4. And this pin could be annoying in some cases. There might be even sacrifices on f3. Alright, so let's see how this continues. Knight e4, bishop e6. Now white faced a choice. I basically saw two relevant options, bishop g5 and knight fg5. Bishop g5 would have been a positional, intuitive move fighting for a d6 square. However, with knight fg5 I thought I can win the h7 pawn and thought in some lines I get an attack against the black king. Obviously my choice was objectively not very good, but was too complicated to foresee, at least for me. A specific question here, if you could answer this. It's about the process of decision making. How would you have come to a conclusion about what to play here? Yeah, first off, you did a good job checking out the kind of moves. Moving knight to g5 is very obvious, right? Or piece to g5 in general. You just need to calculate really. Knight fg5, and I assume you took on h7, yeah, is of course tempting. Clearly. But there's some calculation that needs to be done. And bishop g5, yeah, like you're saying, it's more the positional approach, just exchanging the bishops, and still later having the opportunity or the possibility to put a bishop on g5. Regarding the process, yeah, I would just check both moves and then decide which one I like better. Sometimes also you kind of get a feel which one is safer. And knight fg5, it's disrupting a little bit the harmony of your pieces, but then again, if it works, it works. So it's very concrete. So knight takes h7, nice blow. Black cannot take with the king because of mate on h5, and bishop takes h7 would be answered with bishop takes d5 or queen takes d5. Of course, here you would need to double check. Bishop takes d5. Might run knight into knight d4 already. And you have to double check, okay, is everything fine here? But it looks like. But right now you have some dependencies here. The queen is defending the knight. And you need to check those lines. Just make sure, really make sure that you're not getting into some trouble here. But apparently that's fine. But your opponent played knight f4. That's very interesting. And yeah, also this move you had to foresee and calculate and see what's happening here. And that's the problem, right? Right now your pieces are a little bit uncoordinated. Of course you're attacking the rook on f8, but knight f4 is a nice counter. Alright, so you took on g8. And here your opponent made a mistake by taking on d1. Instead, knight takes g2 was possible, and it looks like sacrificing a piece here. Well, maybe not sacrificing a piece. But going for this, and now you attach long computer analysis. And knight hg5. I assume the problem here is if white plays queen takes d8. Of course, I would love to take off queens with my king on e2. The problem is here that black can take on e4. Oh, maybe not. I was about to say king f3, rook f4 check, and then take on d8. But here you can also play king d3. When I'm going to win the rook on e4. Rook d4 now, just queen takes d4. So rook takes d8, king takes e4. Looks good. White is up in exchange here, obviously. So that's pretty good. So I'm wondering, so probably just rook takes d8 back, and now knight hg5. And that seems fine for you. Are we transposing to this maybe in any of the lines you have given? Knight hg5? No. Now black just takes on g8. Yeah, and this of course feels a little bit tricky with the king. Of course you still pawn up, but black is controlling the f-file. And let's see what lines you give here. And yeah, this is all very, very complicated. And you're saying this is a draw here. Okay, well that's, yeah, quite messy, obviously. What I'm wondering though, what's not clear to me, is what happens here after queen takes d8, rook takes d8, and just knight hg5 back. Knight d4, I can just go king f1. So black probably needs to take the bishop on g8. And now, what now? Yeah, maybe white is having some difficulties still here because black is so active and knight d4 is coming. Yeah, I could imagine black is having enough compensation here. Alright, let's get back to the game. Your opponent took on d1, king takes, and rook check. King c2, king takes g8. Now bishop takes f4, e takes f4, and knight hg5. The dust has somewhat settled. I'm currently 2 pawns up, so I thought that endgame should be winning. Converting it was, however, a challenge for my sloppy technique. Well, we all know it, and I've said already, to win winning positions is tough. So you're not the only one who has struggled with that. Let's see what we can say about your technique. a5. Yeah, that's a good try here by your opponent to open up the position a little bit. King c3, I quite like. b6, okay, complicating it. And earlier we had the question, what can I do to make it as difficult as possible? And here, black's opening up files to get to the white king, which is a little bit loose in the center. Rook hg1, rook dc8. And now I decide to return a pawn in order to exchange black's bishop for my knight and stabilize matters on the queen side. Max a pawn and The weak f4 pawn on the king side should still offer a good winning chance. I thought, well, it sounds like a good practical approach. All right. Let's see what's going on here anyways. What is black threatening, if anything? I cannot really see what black is threatening. So I'm wondering if you hurried a little bit too much to simplify, just because it felt a little bit unpleasant. It looks unpleasant. But if you just play a move like f3, just to illustrate, what is black going to do now? Of course he can take on b4, but it doesn't help him. He can take on c5. You just take back. And you can play knight e6, potentially. You can play rook d5. Nothing going on there. So I'm wondering if you could have just played something like that, improve your position. Even knight e6 here is also moved. It's very possible. Maybe taking on f4. And also bring the knight back into a game, helping to support the queen side. So I'm not sure if b5 was the right way to go here. I understand you felt a little bit uneasy. But it seems you're helping your opponent here by giving a pawn back. Knight a7. And in the chat somebody suggested king c4. Is that crazy? Well, that might be also a move to consider. But yeah, with king moves like that, you need to be careful. But yeah, I mean, I look at it, and if it works, it works. Yeah, why not? Why not, in fact? Now you're preparing b5, maybe. Of course, you need to calculate all of this carefully. But if knight e5, you can probably even just go forward. Just go forward. I don't see anything wrong with it, so black could do something like this, but then again it doesn't help him. I mean, I'm not going to take here along rook b8, I'm just going to retreat, and now I have a protected passed pawn on c5. It's not going to help him. So yeah, I think b5 is not a good option. Knight a7. And here, what about rook d7? Is that possible? Oh, I'm hallucinating. I thought I'm attacking knight on a7 and the bishop. But that's not true, so black can just take on c5. And yeah, that's not cool. So a4, bishop takes c5, knight takes, rook takes, now king d4, double question mark. I was considering king d3 too in order not to let the rook to the second rank, but then I decided to play more actively and had thoughts of getting threats against the black queen side with the king. Yeah, I mean, what is really nice about your position here is a bad knight on a7. So really all you need to do is just neutralize the rooks. So the first move I'm considering here is just king b2, prepare rook c1. Just exchange the rooks, right? Very simple. And if rook c4, yeah, maybe rook c4 is a little bit annoying and black puts the rook on b4. So I'm not sure about that, but even here, now you can think about this. Rook c1, rook takes a4, and yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, this needs to be carefully evaluated. Very carefully. Here already black gets too much play. I want to get in the rooks on the 7th rank, but black takes on b5 and gets some checks in here. I don't like it that much. So maybe king d3 simply. But here already it feels like unnecessary unnecessary work for you. But yeah, bringing the king to the queen side simply also seems fine. Then again, the knight on a7 is terrible. So you must be just about completely winning here. King d4, rook c2. Yeah. Now you're probably making it harder on yourself. Allowing the rook to c2. Yeah, now the king is also a little bit awkward, of course. I know you want to go king e5, king f5, something like that. But might not be that easy to accomplish. But even here, something like this looks still quite good. And intending rook c1, rook c7. Because the knight, once again, is so bad. But your king also needs to go somewhere, but just find a safe place. Not so easy to find a safe place to begin with, but let's just give one sample line here. Not king g6 now, that would run into checkmate. But here, 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 and rook g3. Yeah, now you're just winning. Because attack against the knight and the rook. Yeah, and if black ever moves the knight and the rook comes in. So lines like that might be maybe possible. Just prepare rook d7, f3. Now rook e8. Now you can't play rook d7, which is very sad. Yeah, and your king now is always in the way to getting your rook to e7, it seems like. Rook d1. Okay, rook f8, I mean your position still looks good, of course. Here also rook d7 looks very nice. Maui is suggesting knight h3 on move 29. Right here. Knight h3. Yeah, you're defending the pawn, but it's really passive move, so not really a move I would like to make necessarily, but certainly also possible. Yeah, it feels like white is just still completely winning. Of course, the king is a little bit awkward sometimes, but the knight, like I said so many times now, is so bad. But here rook d7 looks very nice. Bring just the rook to the 7th rank. If rook e8 check, just knight e6. And I'm not afraid of this pin really. And I'm threatening to go king f5. This looks great. Knight e7 maybe. But I can probably just take on f4 already. Something like that. Okay, still not easy. All these variations always need to be checked carefully. Knights are tricky pieces. Yeah, knight e7 might still hold. Alright, let's see what you did. Knight e6, rook e8, rook d8. Oh, now we could transpose actually to what we just saw, but knight e7 might be an issue. Rook d8 takes, rook takes g2, king takes f4, knight d6. I was still optimistic here, but I made a probably bad decision to exchange knights. Yeah, I mean, of course now you've lost one huge advantage you had. The bad knight is freed and is back alive. So that's, yeah, unfortunate. Yeah, this whole sequence once again of rook d8, I didn't like. If there was some other solution there, rook d7, I would love to make this work somehow here, but it's not easy to come up with a move in this position. Or like a convincing move, let's put it like that. Maybe king takes f4, rook takes g2, and now simply h5. Just to take away this square on g6 and prepare knight g5. I would love to keep an active and strong rook on the 7th rank. This looks good. I like this knight on e6. So this rook d8 I don't like. Of course you're exchanging one rook that was annoying you a little bit, but on the other hand, yeah, your knight on d8 is out of play for a moment, far away from attacking this pawn on b6, and you're giving black more time. Here, another move that I would consider is the move king e6. Once again, playing against this knight, threatening to go king d7. That is of that nature. Let's say rook d2. Now just knight f7. Once again, just not allowing this knight back into the game. And that can be a huge factor, honestly. Of course, the question is how to exactly continue here. Well, after rook d4, I can just play rook c1, in fact. Even after other moves, I can probably play that. But yeah, playing against this knight, king e6 looks interesting. What's black going to do? I threaten rook c1 or king d7. I have rook c2, still king d7. You're really kind of tied to defending this knight. Now I threaten knight c6. It's not going to be good for black. Maybe rook g6 is possible. King d7 and knight d6 now. But this just has to be completely lost. After rook e6 exchanging, you threaten to take on f4, you have the king right there. This is just lost. I'm completely sure with the active king and knight. So I think king e6 was a great chance. Okay, king takes f4. So sometimes it's just more important to restrict the opponent's piece than to take this pawn on f4 and allowing the knight back into the game. Rook d1, knight c4, knight e6, king f7, knight g5 check, king e7, rook d4, knight d6, and knight e4, and saying the famous move, first move after time control, and you're calling it a mistake. Yeah, I mean, honestly, here already, really not an easy task to convert this. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. Maybe king e5. The point is that now, after rook e2, you can play knight e4, and I think this rook and game would offer you better chances. Because if the knight takes e4, f takes e4, you can play rook c4, let's say rook h2, rook c4, threatening rook c7. king d7, rook c6. That looks like a good chance with the active king here. And black cannot kick this king out really well. I could play rook c2 maybe, yeah. Maybe that would be a good move actually. Yeah, not easy. Alright. But yeah, in general it feels like this position is already quite difficult to win. Because black has set up his piece now way better than before, and the rook would love to be on c6, but takes some time. Not easy from here. Okay, knight e4 takes, rook h2. What about rook c4 at this point? Point being that after rook takes h4, I want to go king g5 maybe. But black can just play rook h6 here, unfortunately. And rook c6, black could just take. Probably also just play king d7 here because the pawn games are fine. Yeah. So let's see what you did. King g3, rook b2. This was the motive I had missed when I exchanged the knights. Now it's very hard to make progress. Rook b4 is a potential idea. Yeah, and we're actually seeing something similar to what we just had covered. Rook h3, now you play this, rook c4 takes, king f5, rook h5, king g6. Rook h1. Okay, but now your king is ending up on the h file. Now rook b1 again. Yeah. And rook b4 is the point. So let's see if you could try anything better. Check. No, this is all check. Takes, but just rook a1 here. And take on a4. Draw. Yeah, I don't think there was much to do in this endgame here in your game. Of course, with the king so far away, well, we don't need to look at this anymore. And he's saying, in general, I think the game was pretty interesting. In the opening, I was early confronted with a move I didn't know about. A few moves later, there was a very hard choice between a position, a normal move, and a wild, concrete one. I'm still pondering about the question if I could have made a better decision there with a different thought mechanism. When I reach a winning ending, I would be interested in how strong a player would handle that phase of the game in order to win without allowing that many counter chances. Yeah, I think in the opening, that choice between bishop g5 and fg5, well, just a matter of taste maybe as well, and also, yeah, your intuition, your feeling for, is there anything black can do? And if you see this move knight f4 and those lines from knight takes g2, then maybe you might say, looks a little bit dangerous. So I think it's a lot about calculation there, and yeah, developing this experience. Regarding the endgame, I think b5 is possible, what you did there, especially since it put this knight in a very bad place, but maybe it wasn't necessary. If you can, keep your two extra pawns, and okay, maybe you feel a little bit uncomfortable with the king on c3, but I couldn't see or identify any threats black had, so you could have just improved your position further and then go from there. But even after that, you had several opportunities as far as I could tell. Especially this move king e6 I thought was pretty interesting. But also just activate your pieces, and yeah, this exchange rook d8 I didn't like too much. But then, even then, king e6 restricting the black knight, that was huge. And then you just allowed, you kept an extra pawn, but you allowed your pawn to consolidate, to bring his pieces back on good squares, to bring the king into play, the knight into play, and that was already really difficult. And I think going into rook endgame, okay, well, maybe it was an inaccuracy or mistake, but the big winning opportunities you had missed earlier, I would say. But like you said, very interesting game. You had a good showing and almost beat your much stronger opponent. All right, guys, you know what? Let's do one more. I said 90 minutes, but we started a little bit late, and let's do one more. Let's do one more. I hope you guys are still with me here. So let's do one more by, let's see. Yeah, by David Franklin. Who is Chess Chipmunk, I believe. And he was playing against Sam Schmackel, who has a rating of 2450. All right, another good game. Good quality games I'm getting sent to here. Will be interesting, I'm sure. All right, let's go through it. So this is the Slav variation, half Slav, I believe. Not that I know much about it, unfortunately. But this all looks familiar. Takes. Yeah, I have seen this before. Bishop g2. This move has recently become fashionable. Now f6. Yeah, I also know there are those lines with g5, but okay, f6 I haven't seen before. Castle, now g5. Recommended by Boris Afrok in his book on a classical Slav. I want to say slave, but it's just not right. Let's turn off the computer. So nice opening preparation here by black, certainly. G takes f4, knight takes d7, and queen takes d7. I couldn't remember for sure if this was right, but I recall Afrok saying that black had nothing to fear in this endgame. Takes. G takes f4. Interesting. So black has sacrificed a pawn, but has the two bishops in the endgame. Very interesting. Rook fd1 and bishop e7. The two bishops counterbalance white's extra double pawn, although I can't say I was confident of holding this. Yeah. Not sure how confident I would be. But yeah, you might want to recheck your opening repertoire, because it seems here that you don't have a lot of chance for a win. In general, that's psychologically speaking already slightly uncomfortable situation to be in, because you know you're pretty much going to defend for the whole game, and if it works out, you're going to draw. So just mentally, that's not a nice situation to be in. But yeah, I mean, if it's recommended by a strong grandmaster, Afruk, in his book, then I'm sure the endgame is fine. But personally, I would probably not opt for it. Rook ac1, king b8, rook d4, rook d3. Interesting, to swing the rook. And I'm wondering if you could have inserted rook g8 at some point already, like here. Just ask what a question here. Move the king, right? And just put the rook on the open g file, threaten bishop h3. And white would need to do something like king f1 or king h1. This already tells you something. Probably king f1 makes more sense. But that helps you already. And it wouldn't allow this, or it wouldn't allow here to go rook d3 and answer rook g8 with rook g3. But the opponent didn't do it. He played rook d4. rook g8, rook cd1. Yeah. Now it's already too late to go bishop h3 because rook takes, bishop takes, rook takes d8 is possible for white. So I think you could have done this earlier. King c7, king f1, and rook g6. Why not, you're saying? Oh no, you're saying why not e4 here for white? I don't know, we have to ask your opponent. But your opponent played e3. Rook h6, king g1, and rook g6 back. King h1, white is playing for a win. a5 is saying I like this move, which fixes the pawn a4 and asks what white is going to do next. Yeah, I think that's a decent move. I'm not that happy that you ended up in this pin on the d file. You know, I would love to see you bring this rook into a game as well. And I'm really, you know, I'm wondering if you could have avoided that somehow. No, here it seems to be too late already. But yeah, what I'm really not sure about, to just go back to this once more, is this move bishop e7, because I'm not sure if it's doing too much. I'm just thinking if you were afraid of knight e4, and white has the option to go knight g3 maybe in some lines. But here now you could still play bishop e7, knight e6, just king c7, and it still feels like you have gained something. But probably white can just do that. Alright, let's return. a5. Yeah, I think it's a decent move. Fixing this, knight e4, the knight has no particular business here, but it's hard to find a plan for white. c5. The black queenside pawns are slowly uncalling, almost in the style of a Berlin. Interesting. Rook d5. Yeah, I mean, this move c5 you need to be careful with, because of course you're weakening a lot of light squares, d5, b5 to long diagonal. But if it concretely works, then why not? And here you miss taking the pawn a4, right? I wonder if your opponent, I don't know, I'm sure you didn't miss it either, but yeah, take an a4, rook takes d8, bishop takes d8, now the rook is attacked, rook a1, bishop c6, threatening rook takes g2, and after knight g3 you can just play b6, yeah, and you're definitely very comfortable here with the strong queenside majority, so it'll be a nice position for you. Yeah, I'm wondering why your opponent played rook d5. Couldn't he have gone rook c4? That looks like a possible move. Okay, anyways, we're analyzing for you, not for your opponent. So let's get back to the game. Bishop c6 you played, not taking the pawn a4. Okay, rook takes, bishop takes, now f3. This move came as a surprise. I'm not sure. Ah, okay. I'm misreading here. So f3 was played, bishop e7 back, protecting a pawn on c5, threatening a4, and now knight c3. But you had expected f5. Okay. Yeah, f5 certainly also possible. Knight c3 was played. yeah, now it's kind of telling. I mean, yeah, c5 would have been nice if you took the pawn on a4, right? Because then there's an immediate benefit. But now you wish you still had the pawn on c6. So it was kind of double-edged. I mean, it worked, but you just didn't follow up with bishop takes a4. And now you give white squares for the knight. And here you played rook g8. But you're saying the best bet for a caller would have been f5 and then just retreating with king d8 and keeping the bishop pair. Yeah, bishop pair is a strong force, but even here, if white plays e4, probably still just rook d6, yeah. Yeah, but you will need to defend here, of course. Well, actually, now you're threatening to just take on d5, and you might be absolutely fine. Yeah, but something like this, but still, you're still a pawn down. So you will need to defend further. But yeah, keeping the bishop here certainly would have been nice, because here now this endgame uncomfortable. You're down a pawn, of course it's opposite colored bishops, but still. And now rook d8. You didn't play king c6. You went for the opposite colored bishop endgame. Very interesting. Very interesting. But maybe lost. Maybe lost. So the alternative would have been to keep the rooks. But yeah, this would have been quite uncomfortable. I don't need to tell you. White has very good chance here as well. So rook d8. Let's see how this went. Takes. Takes. Bishop f1. In its usual time pressure, Sam starts playing very well. I was worried that there wouldn't be a fortress, but there seems to be one after all. I was worried that there wouldn't be a fortress, but there seems to be one after all. But you missed it, so I'm understanding that correctly here. You played c4, gave a pawn, but now you could have played king d6, king g2, f5, e4, and just bishop h4. Yeah, I like that. He takes f5, bishop e1, king h3, and h5, and there's no way through. The king will stop this pawn, and those treble pawns are not going anywhere. And e5 check, king e7, king e6, yeah. Yeah, you're saying the text move just gives a pawn for no apparent reason. That's true. Yeah, keep your pawns. Keep your pawns. Yeah, king d6, king g7, king g2. It seems the fortress is still there with f5. Yeah, probably didn't matter too much to give this pawn. But you played bishop b6, so still f5 here. Bishop h4. Okay, this is not easy to find, obviously. And this is much trickier than what we had seen earlier. So it was a rapid game, so yeah, it makes it a little bit more difficult to find all these moves. Bishop b6, e4, bishop e3, king g3, c5. Okay, now just white puts the king on f5, and yeah, it's coming in. And is winning. Could have also just taken on f6 here, but this works as well. Okay, the h pawn is running. Yeah, interesting endgame, certainly. Well, it all was fine. I mean, up to the endgame, which was still a draw, but then you didn't find the exact setup. But it seemed you took a lot of good decisions, didn't have that huge problems to hold the endgame, just messed up this final stage, the opposite colored endgame, opposite bishop colored endgame, opposite colored bishop endgame. It's getting late here. If you had found some more precise moves there, and I'm not sure what your time situation was at that point, then you would have saved that game. So yeah, the opening seems fine. It's just maybe a matter of taste, whether you like this kind of play where you defend. And then yeah, you even had some chances to take the pawn a4, and then have good chance, I think, to play even for a win. But okay, that's chess. We miss stuff all the time. All right, I think that concludes the session today. I took a little bit longer to go over the games today. Not sure how many I did. I did 4, I believe, but that's analysis. It takes some time. And next week, I'm hoping, I'm pretty sure, but I cannot say with complete certainty that I'm going to have 2 shows, because I'm still having this hope, this dream that I'm going to get through all the games that have been sent to me. But then the problem is people just send new games, and it's just like a never-ending quest. But I want to do some more. I'm not gonna be with Chess24 much longer, just about a month and a little bit. And then there's the Olympiad coming up where we'll be involved. So I want to do some more shows and get through some more games. And Sandor Farkas is asking if I got his game. Let me check, Sandor, real quick before we end the show. If I got it, I can tell you in a sec. Sandor Farkas. Yeah, I got your game. Actually, I think you'll be up in the next show. I'm still going in chronological order. So actually today I was still looking at games from the beginning of August or end of July. So, just take some time, because I got a lot of games and I don't think it's fair to leave anybody out just because, I don't know, they have sent it earlier. So I'll get you done. All right. Thanks for everybody watching, and see you soon, probably on Monday, most likely on Monday, 5 p.m. on Chess24. Bye bye.